Hey, Durst Avenue. Hope you guys are doing good. And anybody else who's watching, this is day 2 of Christmas with a Doctor. We are in Luke 2 and this quintessential sort of birth narrative of Jesus. This is the Christmas story that we read sometimes. I know we read from Matthew and from Luke on either Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, and sometimes we'll split them up. Sometimes we'll read from Isaiah as well. But as we're on this second day, there's something I think just a brief point. It's not new, I think, but I think it's important. And I'll tell you, when there's no place for you to stay, when you feel like there's no place for you, it can be a frustrating feeling, can't it? When you feel like I know sometimes if you're in a crowd of people that you don't know, or you're around a bunch of strangers, some of us who are a little more introverted like I am, you get around those people and you think, I can carry on conversations, but I don't really feel comfortable here. I know, and even that can happen, not just in social situations, but with places to be. I remember when I was much younger and pretty stupid, I had gone to the beach for a weekend with a friend of mine. We were going just to hang out, and really it was a last minute sort of trip. We didn't plan it. We just left on a Friday afternoon after work, and we barely had enough money to stay at the hotel at the beach that we were going to for that one night, and then get something to eat from a grocery store, and then like fix sandwiches or something. So we were on a shoestring. It was really the kind of situation where I was like, we shouldn't have gone. We didn't really have the money for any kind of emergencies or anything unexpected, which is exactly what happened. We ended up locking his keys in his car at a rest stop, and so we had to pay like $75 to a locksmith who had to make a long drive to come pop the lock on his truck. And so we were left with virtually no money, but we were almost to the beach. So like young idiots do, we went ahead and went instead of going back home. So we didn't have enough money for the hotel we were going to stay at. We were just our budget was completely blown. But there was this one little ramshackle sort of inn, if you want to call it that was in the same area where we were going. And so we walked in looking just like some jokes, honestly. And we looked at the guy and asked, how much would a room be? Just the cheapest room that you've got. And the guy looked at us. He said, well, it's going to be this much. And so we started taking dollar bills out of our pocket. We were pulling change out of our pockets, and we were about $2 or $3 short. And we looked at the guy and just said, is that enough? And he looked at us like we had no idea who we were. Like he looked at us just so disgusted. I will never forget it. And he said, fine. It was late at night. He wasn't going to rent the room anyway to anybody else coming in. And so he gave us the key to what is to this day the worst hotel room I've ever stayed in. The floor was slanted because of where it was in the building. We saw a couple of roaches, or you guys call them palmetto bugs, whatever. But it was the worst. But we had a place to sleep. And we got up and we enjoyed the beach all day the next day, and we drove back home completely broke, poor, and hungry that next night. But the story of Christmas comes down to part of it anyway. It comes down to this story of two people coming into town without a place to stay. And so I'm going to read just a couple verses at the beginning of chapter 2, starting in verse 4. The Bible says, and Joseph also went up from Galilee, from the town of Nazareth, to Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem. And he went because he was of the house and lineage of David, so he could be registered with Mary, who was his betrothed, who was with child. And while they were there, the time came for Mary to give birth. Now listen. And she gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling clothes, and she laid him in a manger because there was no place for them in the inn. The story of Christmas is this unexpected story because Mary and Joseph get into Bethlehem because the governor of Syria has said, we are going to have this time of registration because we want to make sure we're getting as much taxes, and they're going to exploit taxes too, more than likely. But they want to make sure they have everybody on the roll. And so even though Mary is very, very pregnant, they make this journey from their hometown all the way back to Bethlehem, which is where Joseph's people come from. And so they get there, and there's no vacancy in the inn. And I think that there's just this part of us that we read this story and we think, yeah, that's just how it is. So they went to this beautiful space where there were animals, cows lowing, and the sheep were rubbing up against them with their wool, and they had this nice warm manger. That is not the picture at all. In fact, there was no room. The reason Mary and Joseph are in this place where there's a feeding trough for animals is because there was no place to stay. Not because that was a place to stay, but because there was no place to stay. And so they had to stay there. And I think sometimes it feels like that there's a part of us that, man, we could have what God has for us. We could have the thing that God has promised us, but there just doesn't seem to be room in our life. Our life isn't structured to receive the blessings of God or to receive the promises of God. And so we find ourselves struggling because there's just no space. There's no space for us to have what God has for us. And I just want to tell you, don't stress just because your place of rest doesn't look like the place that is best. See how that rhymes? See how that worked out real well? That's rhythmic and everything. So don't stress just because your place of rest doesn't look like the place that's best. What I want to tell you is that God meets us in places where we never would have expected to meet him. God is not looking for the perfect space. He's looking for people who are willing to receive him. God is not looking for us, like he didn't need Mary and Joseph to clock in and have reservations at the Ritz so Jesus could be born and so that the world could be changed. He just needed two people who were willing to believe that God could actually conceive life in the way that he conceived it. And as long as he had them, see, it's not about the environment they were in. It's about the environment that they were. It's not about the space that they were inhabiting. It's about who they were inhabiting inside of. They were inside the will of God. They had trusted by faith that this was God's plan for them. And so where they were didn't matter, because the blessings of God are not limited by where you are or how you feel like you're in the wrong place. The blessings of God are only limited by the fact, by whether or not we're willing to walk by faith in the place where we are. The Christmas story, I just thought through this, is filled up with places that God shows up that we would never have expected him to show up. He brought John into Elizabeth's barren womb, and he brought Jesus into Mary's virgin womb. He brought room into a place marked no vacancy. He brought light into a place of darkness, and he would bring hope into a place of despair, and he brought freedom into a place of restriction. Can I tell you, later on in the Jesus story, he's going to bring life eternal into a place that was called death. One writer said it so beautifully, and I've just remembered this quote for years and years, that Jesus came into this world through a door marked no entrance, and he left this world through a door marked no exit. The virgin womb and the empty tomb is proof that God can meet you, bless you, and keep his word to you in places that you didn't expect him to. Don't you dare let the compression of this year, don't you dare let what you believe to be fear overwhelming you. Don't you dare let political intrigue or sickness all around you or social unrest convince you that you're in the wrong place for the promises of God to be manifest in your life. Because I'm telling you, even when the inn is closed, God's blessings are still flowing. Read through Luke 2. Let it saturate your soul that God can move in places that you never would have expected him to move, including the places where you are. Jesus is coming in a way that we didn't expect him to show up. And I'm here to tell you, don't look around you to see the space that you're in. Look inside you to see if you've made space for him, who he is, for his promises, and what he wants to accomplish in your life. We'll see you tomorrow, December 3rd, coming up, Luke chapter 3. I hope you guys are doing well. I'm praying for you. I love you, Durst family. All of you who are watching who might not be a part of our Durst family, I guess I love you too, but I don't know you, so I don't want to say too much. But I am praying that God would anoint what has been said. Love you guys. I'll see you tomorrow.